My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me now and we will explore these topics and so much more with fascinating guests, authors, and experts who will guide us to Destination Unlimited. Are you a contactee, abductee, or experiencer? What were those experiences like? What did you learn from them? And how did they change your life and understanding of our place in the universe? My guest this week on Destination Unlimited, Lorraine McAdam, began having contact experiences as a young child, and like many of us with shared experience, was chastised for mentioning them and told she was imagining things. A series of experiences as she grew confirmed what she already knew, that we are not alone in the universe and diverse life forms have been visiting Earth for thousands of years. She joins me this week on Destination Unlimited to share her story and just published book, Phantoms in the Night, or E.T.s, My Lifelong Experience of Contact with the Paranormal. Please join me in welcoming to Destination Unlimited, Lorraine McAdam. Welcome, Lorraine.
Hi there. How are you?
Wonderful, thank you. So nice to have you with us today. Lorraine, please share with us your childhood experiences of early contact and visitations.
Well, the earliest memory I have of anything resembling E.T.s, although at the time I didn't realise it was E.T.s, I want to stress that, was I used to get these two quite handsome men appearing on my ceiling, and it was like, if you will, a projection, a holographic projection onto my ceiling, and I used to converse with these two men, and they were very friendly and seemed very caring and non-threatening, and I used to converse with them when I was a child. And one day my dad caught me chattering away with these two, and he asked me who I was talking to, and I hid it from him, and he just gave me a funny look and went out the room. And he caught me twice talking to these two, but the strange thing is I can't remember what we talked about now when I look back on it. I can remember I did it, but I can't remember what we're talking about. But I can remember what they looked like. They were kind of dressed in black turtleneck sweaters, and you could see through you could see behind them. They seemed to be in space, in some kind of large craft, because you could see the windows came right down to the ground behind them, and you could see space or stars through the windows. And this stopped happening circa around, I was around 9 years old, and they just seemed to not appear anymore. And nothing really untoward happened to me after that until I got to about 12 years old. And then suddenly I started to, I believe, be abducted. But at the time, I don't think I recognised what it was, because I looked at everything through, I'd had a Christian upbringing and gone to church regularly. So I looked at what was happening to me, being paralysed, blacking out when I was paralysed, feeling there was something in my bedroom and things like that, and hearing voices. I looked upon it as a kind of demon persecution, because I did on occasion catch sight of what I now know to be the grey aliens, and they had these huge black eyes, of course, which terrified me. And then I got flashback of being taken through a wall of the house. And I think all the time they were trying to say to me, we're not demons, we're actually as solid as you are, and that we're beings from another place. But there was one occasion they put me back outside with the back door locked against me and the front door locked against me. And I thought, what am I doing in the garden? There was one occasion as well where they drew on my back. I was paralyzed while they did something to my back, and I thought, what on earth are they drawing? And it didn't hurt. I could just tell they were drawing something on my back, but I was terrified, as you can imagine. And I actually waited till I came out of the paralysis that I would come out of eventually, and it would be daylight. Usually when it would start, it would be dark. And there were these hieroglyphic symbols drawn on the back of my nightdress. So I found that utterly terrifying. And I was so frightened, I just didn't know what to make of it, that I went and showed it. Well, I put it in the laundry foolishly, thinking, my mum will wash it anyway. And she really told me off and made me scrub them out myself. And she said I'd done them. And mum wouldn't believe me at all. And a lot of these strange things happened. And she thought, on the occasion I was put back in the garden, she said that I'd climbed down the downpipe, and that I deliberately put myself in the garden because I was attention seeking. And she wouldn't believe me about the strange symbols that appeared on my nightdress. She just wouldn't believe me at all. She said I had a vivid imagination. And it was all very frightening for me at that age, because in 1976, there was hardly anything. In fact, I don't think Whitley Strieber wrote Communion until the 80s. And there was just nothing about this. So I just put it all down to demon attack because of my Christianity, my Western world viewpoint.
Now, getting back to the Nordic visitation.
Yes.
They were not frightening beings. Who do you think they were? Perhaps angels?
Yes, I did. The first encounter I believe I had with a Nordic was when I was a teenager and I was doing my pre-nursing course, going to college. And I talk about this in my book, and I used to I lived on a huge estate and I wasn't very wealthy, so I had to catch the bus. And usually there'd be about 10 people at the bus stop catching this early morning bus. But she put in an appearance twice, and each time that she did that, there was only me and her, very strangely. And I would look at this girl, and I have a picture of her in my book that I drew from memory. She had very high cheekbones. She was very beautiful, very flawless skin, I would say. She was very beautiful, like a supermodel. And I looked at her and I just felt this connection. That's all I can describe it as. She was just utterly, I would say, a higher energy than us even. And we didn't speak at all. It was almost like we just exchanged kind of energies, really. I know that might sound odd, but I just felt that I resonated with her on a more spiritual level. And then there was as I got older, I'd be about 15, something like that. And these two, I'm going to put Mormon in inverted commas, and you'll see why in a minute. These two Mormon came to the house, and my mum was in the first time they came. And, they did the usual thing that Mormons do and just talked a little bit about the Book of Moroni and things like that. But then there was a dark-haired one and there was a blonde one. And the blonde one later came back on his own, which I'm told that they don't allow, which is strange in and of itself. And he sat next to me on our couch, and I can remember us having a conversation. And again, but I cannot remember what he was saying to me for the life of me. I can't remember at all what he was saying to me. But I felt as if he was in some kind of disguise. And I actually saw him 10 years later, the same guy, and I have a really good memory for faces, so I know it was him, when I was later a senior staff nurse and I was going to work one night. And the same two guys that had visited me when I was, 15, bear in mind I'm now nearly 29, they hadn't aged one bit. And I thought, and they asked my colleague for the time. They didn't talk to me, but when they were asking him for the time, I was looking at the both, and I looked at the blonde one, and it was like he was saying, yes, it is me. Yes, I do. You do know me. And it was, I know that sounds strange.
Not at all.
But
getting back to your early experiences when you were a child, you had mentioned your mother's reaction to this. How did that reaction influence you in terms of your ability to discuss these experiences?
Well, it just made me think, if my own mother doesn't believe me, everyone's going to just think I'm a nutcase every time I bring this up. They're just going to think, you're a lunatic or something. And there was another, the first time I actually saw a UFO was when I was halfway through nurse training. I was on night duty, and I was working with an auxiliary nurse, or you call them nursing assistants, I think, in the States. And she came to me and she said, "Look at that." And I said, "Look at what?" And it was a very old hospital. The windows were very long, and you could look out over the fields. And there was this orange ball over the field. They were bringing in the harvest at the time, and there were lots of tractors about and things, but there was definitely an orange ball, and it wasn't the sun, because the sun was setting, in the process of setting at the time. And we reported this the next day to the matron. This is the point I'm coming to. And the matron ridiculed both of us and told us we weren't to talk about it to anyone, weren't to tell anyone else. And we happened to go home on the same bus together, and neither of us could understand why we were told not to say anything to anyone, and she virtually looked at us like we were a pair of nutters. And just mocked us, basically. So it taught me both my mum's reaction, people that are authority figures just seem to react really badly to this, and told you to shut up and stop talking rubbish, or, stop, you're a complete nutcase if you start telling people things like that. So I just stopped. It just made me think, I can't tell anyone, I'm going to have to hide this. And that was so hard and traumatizing in and of itself, because not only could I not articulate what was happening to me, because and I couldn't understand it in the early 70s because there were no books on it, but there was just nowhere to go with it. It was something I had to carry around inside me for a long, long time, without any feedback from anyone or contacting anyone that had experienced similar things. So it was very hard.
I had shared with you offline, and I've shared on this program before, a similar reaction to those. Yes. I reported my experiences to as a child, being told I had an overactive imagination. Yes. When I had taken a book from school called "You Will Go to the Moon and Wouldn't Return It," and was asked by the teacher why, and I said, "It's wrong." And she said, "How do you know it's wrong?" And I said, "I've been there." Well, needless to say, the counselors were called, my parents were called, and so on. But for those who are listening to us right now, for parents of young children who start reporting these experiences to their parents, what Yes. would you offer? What advice would you offer to those parents?
I would say, whatever you do, you must not invalidate their experiences by either saying it's just your imagination, or, this hasn't happened, or don't talk about this, or people think you're a nutcase. Any of those reactions, or I'm going to take you to see a doctor. You don't want to be doing any of that. What you need to do is listen, which can be a hard skill, actually, surprisingly. Listen to what they've got to say. Don't interrupt. Don't tell them that hasn't happened, or react by you ridiculing them. That would be the worst thing you could do. And try and validate, listen to what they're telling you, and validate if no matter what it is, and try and have a more enlightened attitude than maybe our parents did, because there's so much more out there now than there used to be as well. There are people you can talk to. There are abductee groups on Facebook, and I would direct parents to things like that as well. The work of Mary Rodwell does a lot of work with what we call starseed, because it could very well be that you might have a starseed child as well. Because my own children have come to me with experiences, and of course I immediately understood. But if you haven't encountered it before, try not to react badly to it, I would say.
Absolutely. Now, you also share that you were openly psychic, and a gift that was shared by another one of your relatives. Please tell us about this.
Well, my great grandmother and grandmother both had psychic abilities. My grandmother Annie could read tea leaves, and she could read. She was a bit of a spirit medium, apparently, as well. And also her sister. I didn't actually ever meet my mother's mother, because she died when I was a baby. But her sister had the same abilities, and she actually told me that I had 4 spirit guides, which I found a bit of a surprise when I was a teenager. I used to call her Auntie Rainhard because she always knew when it was going to rain. I don't know, this sounds funny. And she would tell me, you need to get an umbrella, you need to put a coat on, and it might be a really lovely sunny day. And she was always right, infuriatingly. And so I just nicknamed her Auntie Rainhard behind her back. But yeah.
Nice.
But yes, it was in the family. Yeah. So I sometimes wonder if there was something in me. Is that what attracted the E.T.s to me?
Very possible. What
Yeah.
happened in the late 1970s that changed everything for you?
The most frightening thing that happened that made me think this can't be demons after all, I actually found two of my plastic, the black plastic coat hangers.
Yes.
Well, I found them in my wardrobe after I felt I'd been taken, or whatever it was that I understood it at the time as. And they'd been literally fused together so that they'd melted together inside my wardrobe. And that, above everything, even being locked out, made me think, what on earth is going on? This must be something more tangible than spiritual persecution, and I was so frightened by this that I just put them in the bin. I should have kept them. For evidence. But I was so frightened, I just wanted to get rid of them. I didn't want to face up to it. That really shocked me into thinking there's something more to this, than just mere demonic or whatever persecution. Yeah.
Now, your reading of Whitley Strieber's groundbreaking book, Communion, was a wake-up for you. How so?
Oh, it was absolutely. I couldn't put it down when I saw it because the first thing that struck me was the face on the front, the original first edition. And I looked at the face on the front and I saw it in a bookshop and I couldn't take my eyes away because I thought, I know that face, was the first thing that went through my mind. And what I've been ascribing to be demons, once I read this book, and I read it twice all the way through, I had to then accept was not demons at all. It was some kind of E.T. And I was absolutely amazed and traumatized all at the same time by this. And reading that book actually freshly gave me another bout of what I call PTSD. I think you call it the same in the States. Mm-hmm. And I was so shocked and shaken up by it that I had to take time off work at the time. And I ended up being put on antidepressant therapy for a while because I had to face the reality that I had been interacting with E.T.s at that point. And that book really did wake me up big time, to the fact that it wasn't demons at all. It was E.T.s.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then what strange event did you experience in 1986 while in Cyprus?
Now, that was interactions with both the Nordics and, I believe, a grey elder, for want of a better way of saying it. What happened was I got chronic food poisoning. I was a nurse at the time and we'd taken 2 patients out there for a holiday. I'd gone with a nursing assistant, so I was in charge, which made it even worse. And I was only newly qualified, really. And the first night we arrived, I had some kind of salad and I immediately started with really bad vomiting and food poisoning and nausea. I was really, really ill, quite badly food poisoned. And by the time I was taken to hospital in the early hours, I was passing out in the ambulance and they had to give me oxygen and that sort of thing, and I remember just passing in and out of consciousness really and feeling very weak. And when I woke up, by the time I came to, it was daytime, and I think they'd put intravenous saline drip into me because I could feel my hand hurting. And I looked across at the bed next to mine, and there was I was disconcerted to see, because I was a vain teenager at the time still, because you did nurse training at 17, so I'd just sort of come out of teenagerdom, so to speak. I was disconcerted to see there was this handsome young, what I took to be a Swedish boy, a Swedish man. And there were 4 really equally, but all blonde, pale-skinned people, very good looking, all of them, visiting him. So there were 2 men and 2 women visiting him, similar age, looked in their early 20s like I was at the time. And I looked and I thought, oh, how embarrassing. I'm in a right state here. I probably look like death warmed up, and I'm just my look. I meet this handsome guy in this hospital bed, and I was feeling very miffed about it. And one of them, I was actually itching to go to the loo, and I don't know why, but I couldn't locate, maybe it was because I was so poorly, I couldn't locate my call belt button for the nurse. So I asked one of them if she would just help me get to the loo, which was just off the ward. It wasn't very far at all. And she went and physically got me a wheelchair and physically put me in it and physically wheeled me to a short distance to the loo, which I used, and then came back. She put me back in bed. She just seemed to me to be a very caring Swedish lady at the time, is what I wrote her off as. And anyway, I got back in bed, promptly fell asleep because I was so weak. And I came to later on, and it was dark, and I looked across, fully expecting to see this chap gone. And the bed was all completely made up, nice and neatly made up. And you'd think, wouldn't you, that if somebody moved, of course they would disturb you and you would hear the noise of them moving. Nothing at all. And then the nurse came through to reattach my saline drip because it had come out. And I asked her, I said, where's that young man gone that was in the bed next to me? And she just replied, it shocked me. She said, what young man? There's never been a young man next to you. You've been in here on your own all this time. There's never been anyone except you in here. So how do you think that made me feel? I just felt like, oh my God, I wonder if it was angels in disguise, because of course I was still a Christian, and Jesus taught us that not to be afraid when we're in terrible situations, which I felt I was because I was in a strange country and I was seriously ill. I just put it down to angelic intervention at a time when I was really very ill in a foreign country.
The fascinating sharing of the experiences of Lorraine McAdam in her new book, Phantoms in the Night, or E.T.s, My Lifelong Experience of Contact with the Paranormal. Lorraine, please tell our listeners where they can get your fabulous book and learn more about you.
They can get my book on Amazon UK and Amazon USA. They can also get it at 6 Books. If they just put Lorraine McAdam, if they go to Amazon, either Amazon, and put Lorraine McAdam, LORRAINE, and it's M small c capital ADAM, into the search engine of Amazon, then it will bring my book up automatically. But you've given them the title as well, so I'm sure.
Absolutely,
either way.
And you're also on Facebook.
I'm on Facebook. There's a link to my book on there. I have a book page that people are welcome to come and ask me questions. Also, if you do get a copy, either electronic copy or a physical copy, I have put my email address at the back of my book because I'm quite open to talking with other people or speaking with them on Facebook at any time. I don't mind. Part of the reason I wrote the book was because I want to try and contact other people of a like mind that have been through similar things and are struggling with it for whatever reason, like I did. That was the main reason I feel I had to come out about this. So any of those, you can contact me by any of those means. Yeah.
And we'll be back with more of Lorraine after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
The cutting edge of conscious radio, Om Times Radio, IOM FM. Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week, Lorraine McAdam. Her book, Phantoms in the Night, or E.T.s, My Lifelong Experience of Contact with the Paranormal. Lorraine, in the early 1990s, you had a strange interview in the city of Manchester. What was strange about it?
It was very strange, really, because what happened was I thought I was going for a sales job in Manchester. And I caught the train from Manchester Piccadilly. Can I just stress, though, but before this happened, I did have a sighting of a red UFO. And he's my ex-husband now, but my first husband actually witnessed this with me. And it was in the sky and it stopped. And then it kind of, he was saying, oh, no, it's got to be a plane. That. And I said, no, that's not a plane, because a plane can't hover like that. And it just whizzed off eventually. And I said, see, it's not a plane. And, and then after that happened, this strange interview came up. So I wonder sometimes if there was a connection. But anyway, I got on the train and I got off at Manchester Piccadilly. And I can't actually even remember how I got there, which in and of itself is weird. I remember I went in a taxi because I had no idea where it was, and just gave him the address on the little box thing. And it was like a sort of boxy office building. And I remember going up some stairs and I went in. But the weird thing was about this office and the receptionist behind the desk. She was blonde and blue-eyed. She looked like you'd imagine a Swedish lady might look. But when I look back now, I have my suspicions about her being maybe a Nordic E.T., because the funny thing was there was nothing on the walls. They were completely bare. They were yellow. And I was asked to sit on a plain red plastic chair. There was nothing on a desk. And even for the 90s, that's strange, because you would expect, at the very least, an electronic typewriter and a dial phone, as it was back then. But there was nothing at all. This desk was just bare. And I thought that was weird. And then I asked her, while I was waiting, if I could go and use the loo. And this seemed to fluster her a lot. She just couldn't cope with the fact that I was asking for the loo. And I said, well, surely you must have a toilet or something. And she said they didn't have a toilet available for me. And I said, what, not even a staff toilet? No, nothing. And she really seemed to get flustered about this, which I think, looking back, was very weird. I do have this psychometric gift of being able to read objects and things, as I said earlier, that I've had since the age of 12, which is relevant to this, as you'll see as I carry on. But as I was sat there waiting, there were things going past, cars going past outside. I could see, because it was summer and the door was kind of propped open. And all these cars were blue, with all these kind of handsome blonde, medium length hair they had, and they all looked identical, these handsome blonde guys in these cars. And I thought, what the heck is going on here, was what went through my head. Not only did it strike me as being a bit bare, very bare. There were no pictures, no data on the walls or anything that you'd expect to find in an office. And I just accepted it at the time. I didn't, although I thought this is a bit odd, like you might think, I didn't think anything of it until I was ushered in. And the man that I was ushered in to see eventually looked to be of African extraction to me. He didn't look at all Nordic. He looked very African in his looks, and he was very broad built man. And he was sat also behind a completely bare desk. And rather than telling me about the job, which is what I was fully expecting as I sat down, he offered me his wristwatch and asked me if I could read it. I believe you're psychometric. And I thought, and it was only afterwards that I thought, how did he know? How did he know I was psychometric? How could he possibly have known? I didn't tell him. But at the time, I just reacted by saying, yes, I'll have a go. I'm trying to read it. And I held it for a while, but I couldn't get anything off it. And he seemed to be very pleased about this. And he took it back and put it back on his wrist. And then he said, there's no job. I'm sorry we've trailed you all this way. And he said, but if you go downstairs, there's a taxi waiting for you at the bottom of the steps. If you go the same way you've come. And it was only afterwards that I thought, wait a minute. When I look back on this, I think there were no mobile phones. They just weren't invented at that point. And I thought, how on earth has he got a taxi waiting for me? There's no phone in front of him. I didn't see him phone for one. And then moreover, when I got in this taxi, the guy that was driving it was also blonde and blue-eyed, and did not say a thing to me, just indicated for me. And when I tried to pay him, when he got me back to Piccadilly Station, he wouldn't accept the pay, and just waved me away, never spoke to me once. And it only struck me as being extremely weird after I came out of that. And I look back on that now and I think, what on earth was that all about?
That sounds like you were tested in some way.
I think so. I think I was tested. It was testing my psychometric ability. And I don't know why. I postulated that this could have been because he felt a bit threatened. I wonder if they felt threatened because quite often, and I've done this so many times, I believe they walk amongst us, the Nordics. And I always know. I don't know how I know. I even encountered a girl in the schoolyard once, and I knew right away. And I know this sounds funny, but I said to her in my mind, I often try telepathic contact with them if I feel their energy. And I said to her, if you're not from here, scratch your nose. I actually sent her that telepathic message. I know that sounds really silly, but that's what I told her. And she immediately put her finger up to her nose and drew it down her nose as soon as I sent that message to her. And I just thought, I'm not a threat. But there's something on some spiritual level where I connect with them immediately, and I know I'm in the presence of a Nordic E.T. And it's happened more than once that where I'll say, "You're not from here, are you?" in my mind, and I'll get some kind of indication. And I wonder if they were just seeing if I was a threat or something, or another suggestion that another friend of mine who's been through similar things said to me, maybe they were just wanting to connect with you at that time and show you they're around you, because at the time I was going through a terrible time with who was then my first husband, because I was in an abusive marriage, and I was trying to finish my bachelor's degree, and I was really struggling with it. And also I was in the process of thinking about getting a divorce. So I think with all that going on, it was very difficult. And I was actually very worried I wouldn't even get my dissertation completed on time. So there was a lot of pressure on me at that time. And I just wonder if that was why, because my dissertation had gone in, but I wasn't sure whether it would pass or not. And I was really worrying about quite a lot of things. And I wonder if it was just family connecting up with me in some way or form.
In the summer of 1995, you were called to the garden of your home, and what you described as a frightening experience. What happened?
It was very frightening at the time, but when I look back on it, I don't think the guy meant me any harm that I encountered, but I'll come to that. What happened was my husband at that time, he was a junior doctor, and he was still doing his registrar. I don't know whether they do similar in the USA, but here you have to do registrar year and train in several areas. And he was on A&E, on casualty. And he was away all night, and I hated it. I always felt a little bit vulnerable on my own as a woman. Anyway, but what happened was he was away all night, and I'd just spoken to him, put the phone down on him, and suddenly there was a total blackout because it was I think it was winter, or it was coming nearer to autumn. I can't remember now fully. Anyway, there was I think it was coming towards the end of the summer anyway, and we're starting to go into autumn, and the nights were drawing in because they do come in quicker in England. I don't know about New York. And the total blackout, and you'll laugh at this, but I actually was downstairs and I saw myself in my long white nightie, and I frightened myself thinking that's a ghost in the window. And then I went to bed and thought nothing of it after giving myself a big fright. And then I woke up and I heard like a voice in my head. It was in my head, and they said, "Come to the garden now." And I was frightened because I hate the dark. I hate the dark at the best of times. I had no candles or any torches or anything. And I thought, no way am I coming to the garden. Whoever you are, you can just get lost, is what I thought. Especially given my history with the, with the previous, with what I knew now to be the Greys. I just assumed it was them, to be honest. And I thought, there's no way I'm coming to the garden. You can get lost. And anyway, a few seconds later, as I was thinking this, I got the buzzing feeling going through my body that I usually get prior to being paralysed. And it sounds like bees, for want of a better way of putting it, is how I would describe it. and it seems to hum through your whole body. I don't know whether you've experienced similar.
Yes.
And I got completely paralyzed, couldn't move. And of course, I blacked out. And the usual things happen where I moved quickly from nighttime. It was pitch black, and then suddenly it was early morning. And then I thought, I don't know what's going on here, but I'm going to go back to sleep. And when I fell back to sleep, I had this really lucid dream that I was in my actual house where I was, and I went down the stairs. And to me, this was not a dream. This was me remembering what had happened during the abduction, because right at the bottom of the stairs, and I remember his face for the rest of my life, for as long as I live, there was this guy, and he was stood there, and he was masked. His nose was covered. He was in a kind of navy blue, tight-fitting, what appeared to be like a diver's suit, and he had wraparound eyes, bigger than a human's eyes, and the irises were narrower, and they were blue, very, very vivid sea blue colour, like, very striking eyes, and his hair was covered. But he seemed to be waiting for me at the bottom of the stairs. So I went to him quite happily. I went down the stairs, and he seemed to greet me. We seemed to greet each other as if we were old friends or something. And I didn't feel at all threatened by him. And as this happened, my dining room ceiling, because it was an open plan house, the dining room ceiling opened up, and I could see lined up. It was like I was going from one dimension to another in the process of doing that. And there were all these craft lined up. They were parked, for want of a better way of putting it. And they were black, shiny craft. And the floor and the walls around them were all smooth, shiny black. I've never seen anything like it on Earth ever. And they significantly were tic-tac shaped as well. And I've never forgotten that. And then after that happened, I had, like, for want of a better word, a series of stills coming into my head. And it was like I was remembering parts of where I'd been taken. And I was walking down a long corridor, and I was being saluted at by these guards who were dressed very similarly to him. He was holding me, so I couldn't escape. And as he went past, he must have been someone important, because they were saluting him by pressing the fist to the chest. And on the walls, I could see the fleur-de-lis symbol, and I could see the Celtic cross along the corridor walls, carved into these walls, into these highly polished black walls. I remember seeing all this Celtic symbolism, and I recognised it because we have the fleur-de-lis on in our family crest, the McAdam crest, and it's also on the crest of the de Gordon family, who we've come from. So I don't understand where the link might be there, but that kind of goes back to what I was saying about we may be related, or there may be DNA things going on here that I'm not aware of. I don't know.
Absolutely. You also share that during pregnancy with your two sons, you
Yes.
were visited. What were these visitations like, and how did they affect your pregnancy?
I was very frightened with my first child. With my first son, I know it was the Greys, because they would come, and I caught one of them. I was having a nap in my middle trimester, and he came, and he had this sort of iron-shaped object pointed at me, and I swore profusely at him, and I was so annoyed, and I said, "Leave me alone, and leave my baby alone," because of course, by then I'd started to read things and read that people had phantom pregnancies, and they would find that they were no longer pregnant. And I was terrified that they would take the fetus, as it was then, growing inside me, because I knew I'd had a pregnancy test and it had all been confirmed. And I was absolutely terrified that they were going to take my baby away. And it really upset me, I thought, what on earth are they up to? But they didn't. But I wonder if they were just checking he was okay or something. I have no idea, but obviously they didn't take him, because he's around. He's actually around now, and he's 25. But I was very frightened, and the same thing happened with my second son. I was actually, when I was carrying him, in my final trimester, I remember being put back in my home. We'd moved to Cumbria by then, and our first house that we lived in when we moved up here. And they put me back in the kitchen, and I woke up under the table, and I had a recall of the beginning of the abduction where it wasn't the Greys. I feel it was the Nordics, because his hands looked human. They looked perfectly human, and I could see the blue uniform. He was wearing a sort of navy blue tight-fitting uniform, and I woke up in the kitchen. I remember so vividly, that I was put back there when I was carrying my second son. So I feel I was taken with both of them. Yes, yeah, definitely.
My guest is Lorraine McAdam. Her book, Phantoms in the Night, or E.T.s, My Lifelong Experience of Contact with the Paranormal. We'll be back with more of Lorraine after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on Om Times Radio.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of Om Times Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Hi, this is Bill Maher. I can find humor in almost anything, but one thing I never laugh about is cruelty to animals. If you don't get the joke either, write People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, 501 Front Street, Norfolk, Virginia, 23510.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week, Lorraine McAdam. Her book, Phantoms in the Night, or E.T.s, My Lifelong Experience of Contact with the Paranormal. Lorraine, you write about a series of contacts between March 2020 and 2021. What were those like, and was there a specific connection to that time frame?
I think that there was, because COVID was a massive threat, and my husband was on the front line as a doctor, a senior doctor, and could have brought that home at any time. So I believe that first and foremost, I was told I was going to go through a very difficult time, but that they would protect me. And I saw a tall figure in my room during the early hours. I caught him, and he looked like a Nordic male in silhouette. He had shoulder-length hair, and he was wearing what looked like the uniform to me is that they were a kind of kirtle-like thing, not like the trousers that our men wear. It comes down. It's a little more kind of like men of Indian ethnicity. And I could see he was very tall, and he gave me this message. But when I reached to put the light on, completely vanished, and I actually doubted my own eyes and began to wonder if I was going mad. And then later at the beginning of, it kind of started in April, and later at the beginning of May, I kind of encountered that again. And they said that I was going to be taken to have a necessary medical procedure done at that point. And I just thought, I just wrote it off. But then the usual kind of experience happen where I got paralyzed and blacked out. And when I feel when I was returned that I found this triangular shape on my arm, and it made an exact triangle. And you could say, yes, you do get things like that naturally with the sun and things, but not that forms a perfect triangle with the dots. And that's what it formed, a perfect triangle. So that happened fairly soon after that. And then we were going to Folkestone when we were allowed to travel in the UK. And as we were going down, a black Land Rover passed us, and it was blacked out windows and everything. And it made our radio fizzle out altogether. And my husband even said, that's weird. I think he just made our radio fizzle out for some reason. And what should have taken 8 hours, an 8-hour journey down to Kent from where we are in Cumbria, only took 6 hours, and my husband just wrote it off. But I think there was something strange there. And also, when we stopped at the London service station, I encountered a blonde male. I felt he was some kind of Nordic E.T. because we seemed to make contact, even though we didn't say anything to each other. Our eyes just met. And it really stirred me out while we're in the services. And then coming back, I was actually taken from a hotel that we stopped at midway coming back. I was actually taken. Somebody ran at me from behind. I could hear them. And then the buzzing started. And I said, oh, God, help me. And they said, the reply was, your God can't help you now. We need to take you. And that happened to me as well. And incidentally, after I saw the man in my room, I pointed my camera into the darkness, hoping, because I could feel his presence still, hoping I could capture him. And I think he might have allowed me to capture a picture of him, because I actually captured a picture of this, what I believe was a Nordic male. There's definitely a man on there. And he was at least 7 feet tall, because you can see my dressing table mirror comes barely up to his waist. I didn't put that in my book because when I tried to, they said that it was so dark that it didn't come up on the print. So I said, if anybody wants to see that, I could email that to them. But I think I'm convinced that he allowed me to take that photograph, because you can definitely make out that he's there. And I sent it to a friend of mine that's a ufologist, and he said that he looks like a Nordic. That was the first thing he said, and I didn't prompt him. His face, yeah. So
for other experiencers and abductees, you share a number of what you call long-term effects of your own experiences. What are some of those effects, and why do you think they are related to the contact or abduction experience?
Some long-term effects that you get are I set equipment off at airports. Some automatic forceps taps don't work for me. And I also set alarms off in shops and things like that. And it's very embarrassing. And I think it's to do with some of the implants that they put in you. And I suspect I might have one in my knee, because the airport people always seem to focus on that part of me and get very perplexed when there's nothing about my person that's metal in there that I know of. Also, you will probably become traumatized initially, mentally and possibly physically. You may get marks upon you, person, you'll be returned. You may be put back outside or in the wrong place. I have been put back on occasion with my clothes, my nightie on the wrong way around or inside out. That can happen too, or with marks on your clothes. I've been returned with strange marks that just will not come out with any amount of washing. Black marks on my underwear and on my nightwear as well. I think you will get your consciousness raised, and more importantly, I feel your set religious beliefs will be challenged. Not that you will lose them, but they will be expanded upon. And what I mean by that is, with me certainly, I've come to believe now that we are all one, and that we're all part of Source, and that God isn't some man sat in the sky on a cloud. God is in and through everything and all around us. And that's the difference, I think, since encountering the E.T.s. And also your consciousness is widened in as much as you realise this Earth is just one planet amongst many, that there are lots of ET races out there, and that's going to be a big shock, I think, to a lot of people who are still in the narrow, or have the narrow idea that it's just us. So that will get challenged as well. I've become more eco-conscious. I'm definitely more green as a result. I think I'm a more compassionate person, and that I've deliberately chosen jobs that serve people, that serve humanity, because I wanted to be a nurse so much. And then when I hurt my back and couldn't be a nurse anymore, I went back to do my teacher training, which again is really serving humanity. And there's a shortage of teachers currently in the UK, which is another reason. I now feel that I'm being called to do therapy, counselling, because there's such a shortage of counsellors in the UK that understand about abductees and what we go through. So I'm thinking of doing some counselling diplomas as we speak. You will probably see more things in the sky, or you may see UFOs even on the ground. You'll have more than your fair share of that than the average citizen. And you may have vivid dreams, or what I call lucid dreams, where you are, in fact, they're not dreams at all. You're actually recovering what's happened to you during, I believe, abductions. And you may react with depression towards some of it, because it can make you feel very helpless initially. But I feel now it's a very positive thing after coming through that. So
what you've described about opening and becoming a more compassionate and serving person is something that I can identify with completely.
Oh, yes, I think so. Definitely. Yeah.
Have you had a recent experience?
Well, I had one yesterday, funnily enough. Just yesterday. It's quite, you'll laugh actually, because I was laughing at the irony of it. What happened was that my son, we lived near the Lake District, and we climb up the mountains a lot. And because it was such a lovely day yesterday, we climbed up a medium-sized one, a Wainwright. They call them the Wainwrights. And we got to the top, and me and my son were behind my husband, and we were coming down, and we were talking about my experiences, and for some reason, after the awakening thing, my son came with me, and he's fixated about the Pleiadians and them not showing the technology, and he was going on, he was saying, why do you always see them? Why do I not get to see them? And why do you always encounter these people? And I said, I don't know, I must be wired right or something. I said, I have no idea. I said, but if you keep moaning on, you'll never encounter them. And it was so funny, because I got a little bit fed up of him because he was moaning a lot. And I went a bit in front of him, about 10 yards in front of him. And I went over a rise, and there was this man coming towards me. This is how I perceived it anyway. And he was very tall. I thought, you're tall. He was at least 6'7". And he looked at me, and he smiled at me, and he had these piercing, slow-shaped eyes like they have. And I just got this energy off him right away. Yeah, you're not from here. But he smiled at me, almost like he was winking at me almost. And then off he went past me. We got to the bottom of the hill yesterday, and I said to Adam, I said, did you say hello to that man? He said, Mum. I said, did you see that man in the blue shorts and the blue T-shirt? The man, the man with the short grey hair and blue eye. Mum, I've been following you all this time, and there was no man. There's never been a man. What's wrong with you? He said. Well, I just burst out laughing, because I just thought, well, I could see him, but you couldn't. And it was like yet another thing, another affirmation, if you will, that, what I was saying about being wired right or something.
Absolutely.
But yeah, and the funny thing is, and you probably laugh at this, I've had several sightings of them around that area where I feel I've resonated, with one of them, and I think, I wonder if it's something to do with ley lines or something around that area. I don't know. Why would they be there? I just don't know. So
my guest is Lorraine McAdam. Her book, Phantoms in the Night, or E.T.s, My Lifelong Experience of Contact with the Paranormal. Lorraine, please tell our listeners one more time where they can get your book and find out more about you.
Well, they can get it on Amazon USA or Amazon UK. It's also available on Six Books, and if you just Google Six Books and Lorraine McAdam, you spell my name Lorraine and M-C-A-D-A-M. If you just put that into any Amazon search engine, it would bring my book up anyway. So I hope you will buy it and read it, and I hope you enjoy reading it.
And you're also on Facebook.
Yes, I'm on Facebook. I have a book link on there. People can contact me on there. And I also have my email in the back of my book if you get either an electronic copy or a physical copy. My email is in there right at the back. And by all means, do contact me and ask me questions about anything in the book.
Lorraine, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story, and also confirming and acknowledging for so many of us that we are not crazy.
Yeah, I know. It's awful, isn't it? Because this is how it makes you feel, and this is the reason I found the courage to come out.
And thank you for joining us on Destination Unlimited. I'm Victor, the Voice Furman. Have a wonderful week.